They told me it was a retreat. A few days in the mountains, my grandson said. Just time away from the city noise. You deserve peace, Grandpa, he smiled. This place, it's like heaven. He wasn't wrong. He just forgot to mention it was a heaven you don't come back from. I'm Harold Blake, 73, retired watchmaker from Dayton, Ohio. I survived the war, lost my wife to cancer, and raised 2 boys who never really learned how to look a man in the eye. My grandson, Levi, was the only one who stayed close. Called every week, visited every month. We played chess, watched the Reds lose, and laughed at the absurdity of aging. So when he handed me a silver envelope marked the Willow Program, I didn't hesitate. The brochure was elegant. Images of lakeside cabins, caregivers in white uniforms, grand pianos beside crackling fires. No obligations, just rest, it said. I should have known. Anything that beautiful is lying to you. It began with the pills. Just a mild relaxant before the drive, they said. Levi kissed my forehead. That was new. I remember the leather seats, the soft jazz, then a cold white room and strangers speaking in numbers. I woke up in a suit I'd never worn. No ID. No watch. Not even my wedding ring. My wrists had faint red lines. I was in a hall with polished floors and a long glass window that looked out over nothing. The walls hummed, and everything smelled faintly of lavender and bleach. I wasn't alone. Rows of others, men and women in their 60s, 70s, 80s, all seated, all silent. Some dazed. Some crying. Some staring at the floor as if waiting to sink through it. Then came the voice. Lot 17B, Harold Blake. Former craftsman. Steady hands. No known medical complications. Full mobility. Opening bid, 100,000. That was the moment the illusion cracked. I wasn't in a retreat. I was in a human auction. And I was the product. The bidding was silent, digital pads, no shouts or paddles. They wore masks, the bidders. Silver. Featureless. Like gods at a masquerade, untouched by guilt. Lot 17B was sold for $260,000. To Client Umbra. They didn't tell me what that meant. They only told me to follow the blue line on the floor. My room, if you can call a cell with a chandelier a room, had velvet curtains and no locks. It didn't need them. The cameras in the corners blinked without blinking. The staff wore smiles like plastic masks and whispered things like, Client Umbra expects cooperation. I was told I would live here indefinitely, serving the needs and expectations of my benefactor. I would be cared for, fed, clothed, entertained, as long as I remained useful. And when I wasn't? Well, there was a black door at the end of the east wing. People who went through it never came back. It's been 6 weeks now. 6 weeks since my name stopped being Harold and became 17B, 6 weeks of morning check-ins, physical tests, etiquette classes, and emotional conditioning. They say I'm adapting well. They say my benefactor is pleased. They say I'm lucky. But last night, while cleaning the antique library in Sector 9, I found something they missed. Behind the third shelf, a loose board. Behind that, a torn journal. Written by someone named Elaine G., Lot 7A. The last entry read, "They don't own us. They just think they do. Meet me in the garden at midnight. Tell no one." Elaine hasn't been seen in weeks. Neither has Lot 7A. But I'll be in that garden. Because if someone else out there remembers who they were, then maybe we have a chance. Maybe they can buy us. But they can't keep us. If you're still here, thank you for listening to my story. And if this sounds insane, if it sounds like fiction, ask yourself, how much do we really know about the places we send our elders? If you want to hear what happened in the garden, If you want to know what's really going on behind the Willow program, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'll keep telling the truth. And hey, before we continue, where are you listening from? Let me know. I want to believe someone real is out there. I wasn't sure if Elaine's note was hope or a trap. But when midnight came, my heart was a drum pounding through my ribs. I slipped out of my room, careful not to trigger the sensors. The blue line on the floor was gone here, just cold marble, silent as a tomb. The garden was nothing like I imagined. No flowers. No birdsong. Just sharp shadows cast by twisted trees under a sickly moon. Somewhere, water dripped like the ticking of a clock counting down my last chances. I wasn't alone. A figure stepped out of the darkness. Elaine. She was thin, almost fragile, with eyes that looked like they'd seen too much, and not enough justice. They took everything, she whispered, but they don't have our minds. Yet. Her voice was raw but steady. They brought us here for something worse than neglect. They sell us again and again, but this isn't just about money. It's about control. She paused, glancing over her shoulder. You've seen the auctions. The masks. The contracts. But you don't know the worst. My stomach clenched. The clients aren't just buyers. They're part of something bigger. A society that uses us for service. Service? Like slaves? Elaine nodded. Not just service. They harvest loyalty, obedience. They record everything. Everything we do, every word we say. They edit it, control it. They watch us like puppets, and if you resist, they break you. A shiver ran down my spine. I thought I knew what hell looked like. I was wrong. Elaine pulled out a small device, cracked and dirty. This is a recorder. A smuggled secret. It's how I've been documenting everything. But they're closing in. If they find it, her voice cut off. A sudden noise, a footstep on gravel, froze us. A guard, maybe more. Elaine shoved the recorder into my coat pocket. Hide it. And listen carefully, Harold. We're not just prisoners. We're prisoners with weapons. If we don't fight, we die. But if we fight, we might just win. Her eyes burned with a fierce fire I hadn't seen in weeks. Then, like a ghost, she vanished into the shadows. Back in my room, I clutched the recorder. My hands trembled. A lifetime of solitude and loss had led me here, trapped, betrayed by family, reduced to a commodity. But Elaine's words gave me something new. A spark. The next morning, as I went through the motions, I noticed things I'd missed. The way the caregivers exchanged quick glances. How some clients had strange bruises. How whispered conversations stopped when staff approached. And then I saw him. Levi. My grandson. He was not a visitor. He was one of them. He stood near the dining hall entrance, speaking quietly with a masked man. Why was Levi here? Why had he handed me over to these monsters? The questions burned like acid. That night, I couldn't sleep. I pressed the recorder to my ear, Elaine's voice crackling through static. Remember who you are. They want to erase you. Don't let them. No. They wouldn't erase me. To everyone listening now, if you think this story sounds unreal, just remember, sometimes the darkest prisons are the ones built with smiles and promises. I watched Levi from across the dining hall, my heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. He looked different, not like my grandson, but like a stranger. His smile was forced, eyes sharper, colder. When he caught my gaze, he didn't flinch. Instead, he nodded slightly, then disappeared through a door marked "Staff Only." Levi was no visitor. He was part of this nightmare. That night, I crept toward the staff entrance. The halls smelled of antiseptic and dread. Voices echoed, Levi and the masked man from before, deep in conversation. "I want to know what happens to 17B, Levi said quietly. "He's more trouble than he's worth." The man's voice was calm, clinical. "He's valuable. He knows too much. Keep him compliant or eliminate." Levi's laugh was cold. "I don't care. Just make sure he stays under control." I stumbled back, heart in my throat. Levi had sold me. Betrayed me. But why? What did he want? In the days that followed, I played the obedient prisoner. But inside, a fire was burning. I reached out to others, slowly, quietly. Some were broken, some were too afraid. But Elaine's words echoed in my mind. "We're prisoners with weapons." Together, we started passing notes, small acts of defiance, a hidden message here, a warning there. I discovered that many of us had been here years, trapped in cycles of deception and fear. Then, one evening, the impossible happened. Elaine appeared at my door, her face pale but determined. "There's a way out," she whispered. "A live broadcast. If we can hijack the security feeds, the world will see the truth." I felt hope surge. But hope was dangerous here. Just as we began planning, Levi found me. His eyes were void of warmth. "You don't understand what you're messing with, Grandpa." His voice cracked, a flicker of the boy I once knew. "No, Levi. I understand more than you think." He hesitated. Then, with a last look of regret, he turned and left. That night, I held the recorder tight. We had a plan. A rebellion. And the whole world was about to watch. If you're still with me, thank you. Remember, stories like this aren't just entertainment. They're warnings. The rebellion was no longer just a plan, it was a lifeline. Elaine, me, and a handful of others met in the underground boiler room. The air was thick with dust and desperation, but also something rare, hope. Elaine unwrapped a battered laptop and a tangled mess of wires. "This will give us control over the security feeds for exactly 15 minutes, she whispered. 15 minutes to show the world what they're hiding. We mapped out our moves carefully. I was to be the distraction, walk calmly through the halls, smiling like a contented prisoner, while others hacked the system. Days crawled by as we rehearsed silent signals and routes. But Levi's presence haunted me. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear footsteps outside my door. Sometimes I saw him watching from the shadows, his eyes unreadable. Why was he torn? Was there still a piece of him that remembered who I was? Then the unexpected happened. One morning, the blue line on the floor was gone. Replaced by red. The announcements came over the speakers, security alert. Unauthorized movement detected. All clients must return to rooms immediately. The compound was on lockdown. That night, whispers spread. Someone had betrayed us. Elaine's face was grim. They know. Someone on the inside. Panic threatened to overwhelm us, but I held my ground. We can't stop now. We have to try. But the next day, they took Elaine. No warning. No explanations. Just a note slipped under my door, "Stop or she disappears for good." I was crushed. The rebellion felt fragile, like glass on a wire. But then I found something in Elaine's room, a hidden folder on the laptop. Files, videos, names. Proof of everything. I realized this wasn't just a prison. It was a machine, one designed to erase us. To those listening now, this story is far from over. The line between friend and foe is blurring. Trust is a currency few can afford. Elaine was gone. Just like that. The silence she left behind was louder than any scream. Days passed in a blur. The compound's atmosphere thickened, like the air before a storm. Faces once friendly turned guarded, whispers faded, and every step felt watched. I couldn't stop thinking about the files I found, the videos of auctions, secret meetings, and horrifyingly, family members signing the contracts that sent their elders here. And Levi's name was there. Not just as a visitor. As a facilitator. One night, I decided to follow him. He moved through the halls with purpose, no longer the hesitant grandson I once knew but a man with secrets weighing heavy. I trailed him to the east wing, the same place with the black door. From the shadows, I saw Levi speak to the silver-masked man. "You can't keep using fear," Levi said sharply. "The rebellion's growing. They want proof, and if they get it, everything collapses." The masked man replied, voice cold as ice, "Then we accelerate the timeline. No more mercy." My blood ran cold. They planned to silence us all. But Levi hesitated. For a brief moment, his eyes flickered toward the garden where Elaine and I first met. Could he still care? Back in my room, I played Elaine's recordings again. Her voice echoed with resolve, "We are more than what they want us to be. Fight. Survive. Resist." I realized this wasn't just about escape anymore. It was about exposing the darkness behind the masks. To those listening, thank you for standing with me. This story is no longer just mine. It's ours. I thought I knew what betrayal looked like. But Levi's face as he stood in front of me in the shadowed hallway was something I wasn't prepared for. Not just the coldness, but the conflict, the pain barely hidden beneath years of loyalty to this twisted system. "You don't understand what they've done to me," he said, voice rough but desperate. "They promised me safety. Power. That this was the only way to protect you, to protect all of us." "Protect?" I spat. "By selling me? By selling us like cattle?" Levi flinched, eyes darting around. "They're watching everything, Harold. If they find out we're planning anything, if they catch wind of the broadcast, we're dead." I swallowed the lump in my throat. The truth was worse than I imagined. They didn't just want obedience. They wanted total control. That night, I lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of my gilded cage. If Levi was right, our window was smaller than I thought. But the fire Elaine lit inside me burned too bright to quit. I had to fight. Over the next days, I met secretly with a small group, the rebels who refused to be broken. They shared whispers of surveillance blind spots, of guard schedules, of a secret tunnel that led beneath the estate. "This tunnel," Elaine said quietly, "might be our way out if the broadcast fails. But the risk was huge. If we were caught, we'd disappear forever." One evening, as I rehearsed the broadcast speech Elaine had helped me craft, I noticed a shadow flicker beneath the door. A note slipped in. "Meet me. Midnight. Garden." The handwriting was shaky but familiar. Levi. That night, the garden was darker than before. I waited, heart pounding, not knowing if this was a trap or salvation. A figure stepped forward. Levi. His face was haunted. "I don't want to be your enemy, Grandpa," he whispered. "I've been trapped too." He told me the truth. That the society controlling the Willow Program had infiltrated our families, our communities. They weren't just selling elders, they were turning our closest kin into puppets. "We have to expose them," Levi said. "But if we fail, no one survives." I nodded. Together, we planned. The broadcast, the escape, the uprising. But now, it wasn't just a rebellion. It was a war. If you're listening now, and this story has gripped you, remember to like, share, and subscribe. And before we continue, where are you listening from? Because this fight belongs to all of us. The chill of the evening air crept under my skin as we slipped away from the dull hum of the estate. The compound was deceptively quiet, like a beast lulling its prey into false comfort before the strike. Elaine was ahead, moving swiftly, her eyes darting nervously as if the shadows themselves could betray us. We reached the back of the kitchens, an area heavily monitored during the day but strangely deserted now. Elaine pulled a heavy metal grate aside, revealing a narrow, dark stairwell descending into the earth. "This is our way out," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The old service tunnels. They've been forgotten for decades, no cameras, no guards, just silence." The air that greeted us was thick with dampness and decay. I swallowed hard, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Behind me, the others followed, haggard faces, eyes bright with desperation and fear. We moved into the tunnel like ghosts, our footsteps muted by the cold stone floor. The smell was sharp, a mix of mildew and rust, filling my lungs with every cautious breath. "This tunnel was built for emergencies," Elaine explained as we walked. "Staff could escape in case of fire or invasion. But it's been sealed for years. Until now." The walls seemed to close in as we went deeper. A faint drip echoed somewhere ahead. My fingers traced the rough surface. The stones were worn, bearing the scars of decades of neglect. We weren't safe yet. The compound might be miles above us, but the enemy was closer than we liked to admit. Halfway through, the silence shattered. A shout, harsh, urgent, echoed from the tunnel entrance. "Intruders! Secure the area!" My heart slammed against my ribs. We scattered, diving into narrow side passages barely wide enough for one person. I pressed my back against the cold wall, hearing hurried footsteps pound after us. Breathless, I peered around the corner. Guards surged through the main tunnel, their heavy boots sending vibrations down the stone. We were trapped. Or so it seemed. Elaine motioned urgently. "There's a fork ahead," she whispered. "Take the left. It leads to an old service shaft." We moved as quietly as possible, every sense stretched taut. The shaft was a vertical tunnel, dark and dizzying. A rusty ladder hugged the wall. One by one, we climbed, higher and higher, emerging into a forgotten basement beneath the west wing of the estate. The room we found was a forgotten storage area. Cobwebs hung like curtains, crates of unused equipment lined the walls. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. But the quiet was deceptive. Back in the estate above, I knew alarms were blaring, guards searching for us. If they caught us, there would be no mercy. We had stolen their secrets. We were enemies now. But we had a plan. That night, in the faint glow of a dying lantern, we gathered. Levi and Elaine shared what they'd uncovered. Levi pulled a small chip from his pocket, its edges worn from handling. "This contains everything, the auction records, the client lists, the contracts, even video footage of the auctions themselves," he said. The weight of that chip felt heavier than any weapon. "If we can broadcast this to the outside world, we can bring the whole system down." I looked at Levi. He was no longer just my grandson. He was a man fighting his own demons. But the path ahead was treacherous. Every step, every breath, could be our last. And the society was watching. Waiting. The stale air in the basement pressed down on us as Levi settled on a cracked wooden crate, the glow from the flickering lantern casting shadows across his face. His hands trembled slightly as he held the small data chip, the one piece of evidence that could unravel the entire nightmare. "I owe you the truth," he began, his voice low but urgent. "You deserve that, at least." I watched him closely, searching for the boy I once knew, the grandson who called me every week, who laughed with me over chess games and ball games. Instead, I saw a man fractured by choices he hadn't wanted to make. Levi's story spilled out in jagged pieces. How, years ago, he'd fallen into debt after losing his job. How the society behind the Willow Program had promised him a way out, work, protection, even a place to belong. But that place came with strings attached. "They didn't just want me as a cog," he said bitterly. They wanted me to bring you here. To deliver you. To keep you quiet. I felt the old sting of betrayal rise like bile. You sold me, I whispered. Levi bowed his head. I was scared. They threatened my family. His eyes glistened with tears. But every day I hated what I'd become. He paused, then pulled out a faded photo. It's from before all this. Your birthday. You, me, Mom. His voice cracked. They used me to break our family. I felt something shift, a fragile thread of empathy cutting through the anger. But now, with the chip, he said, we can fight back. He explained the contents, lists of elite clients, politicians, business tycoons, influencers, people powerful enough to bury the truth forever. And the auctions, he continued. They're more than transactions. They're rituals. Control. Every elder here has a story, a secret they want to silence. I shuddered. Levi's confession wasn't just words. It was a call to arms. And deep down, I knew that without him, the rebellion was doomed. As we sat in the cold basement, a fragile alliance formed, one built on shared pain, hope, and the desperate need for justice. But trust was fragile. The society planted spies everywhere, even here. Levi warned quietly, one slip, and they'll come for us, again. In the dim glow of the basement, the weight of what we were about to do pressed on me heavier than the cold stone walls. The chip Levi had risked so much to secure was now the single thread holding together our fragile hope for freedom. But getting that proof out of this place, into the hands of the world, felt like trying to escape a spider's web without waking the spider. Elaine spread out a crumpled estate map on a dusty table, her finger tracing routes and guard rotations she'd memorized over weeks of careful observation. The compound security network controls all internal cameras and communication feeds. We'll need to hijack the broadcast system to stream the auction footage live. That means getting into the security control room and overriding their firewall. Her eyes flicked up to mine. 15 minutes is all we get before they detect the breach and shut it down. I swallowed hard. 15 minutes. Not much time to expose decades of lies, betrayals, and cruelty. We can't afford mistakes, Levi added, running his fingers through his hair. The society's reach is massive. If we fail, they'll make sure none of us ever speak again. I glanced around at the others, faces drawn, but resolute. We weren't just fighting for ourselves anymore. We were fighting for every forgotten elder trapped in this gilded cage. Over the next few days, our little band moved with increasing urgency. We rehearsed silent signals, memorized guard shifts, and prepared every detail of the plan. Elaine and Levi worked furiously on the laptop, decrypting security codes, preparing the digital assault. I was the distraction. I had to walk calmly through the halls, smile, and act the compliant prisoner, while the others hacked into the system and streamed our truth. The night before the planned broadcast, I barely slept. My mind was a cyclone of memories and fear. I thought of my wife, gone now for nearly a decade. I thought of my sons, silent strangers to me. And I thought of Levi, the boy I raised who had betrayed me, but who now stood beside me in this fight. We were bound by blood and broken promises. Morning came with the same sterile routine. Breakfast was served in the grand dining hall, the chandelier sparkling above faces pale with anxiety and hope. I locked eyes with Elaine briefly across the room. Her nod was subtle but full of fire. As the clock neared the hour, I prepared myself. I walked the halls, smiling, nodding, pretending to be the compliant old man they wanted. But inside, I was a storm waiting to break. Elaine's voice came quietly over a hidden earpiece. Now, Harold. You're live. Suddenly, every screen in the compound, the security monitors, staff tablets, even the large displays in the main hall, flared to life. The faces of the auctioned elders flickered across the screens. Footage played of the masked bidders, the cold exchanges of contracts, the forced smiles, the broken spirits. Gasps echoed around the compound. The staff scrambled, shouting orders. Guards ran through corridors, trying to locate the source of the breach. But it was too late. Outside, across the city and beyond, phones began to ring. Messages flooded social media. News outlets scrambled to verify the shocking live feed. The compound security chief bellowed orders to cut the broadcast, but the system was compromised. The world was watching. Back in the control room, Elaine and Levi raced to maintain the connection. The laptop screen showed a countdown timer, minutes before the firewall reset. "Keep it steady," Elaine urged. Suddenly, alarms blared through the compound. "Lockdown initiated," a mechanical voice announced. Doors slammed shut. Hallways filled with guards. Our time was running out. Levi grabbed my arm. "We have to move. Now." We sprinted through service corridors, dodging patrols, the weight of the world on our backs. Finally, we reached the rooftop. Rain had begun to fall, cold and sharp. The wind whipped at my face as Levi fumbled with the emergency transmitter. "Almost there," he said, voice strained. He punched in the override code we'd stolen. The screen flickered. And then, a crackling voice. "This is Harold Blake. If you're hearing this, the truth behind the Willow Program is being revealed." My voice was shaky, but I forced strength into every word. I told the world about the auctions, the betrayal, the hidden cameras, and the families who had handed us over like property. I spoke of Elaine's courage and Levi's redemption. I spoke for every elder trapped behind these walls. Behind us, guards burst onto the roof. But the world was listening now. And that made all the difference. Minutes later, a distant roar grew louder. Helicopter lights cut through the storm. Voices called in on radios. Authorities, journalists, activists, they were coming. As we climbed the rope ladder to freedom, I looked back one last time. The compound that had tried to steal my identity was crumbling, not from force, but from truth. Days later, I sat before a sea of reporters. Elaine was beside me, her smile weary but genuine. Levi stood quietly, the weight of what we'd done settling over him. The network of corruption was unraveling. Families were reunited. And a dark secret was finally exposed. But freedom came with scars. I had lost trust. I had lost years. But I had gained a voice. If you've listened this far, thank you. This story isn't just mine. It's a warning. Look after your elders. Question what you're told. And never let silence hide the truth. The moment the alarms blared, everything spiraled out of control. Our carefully laid plan, built over weeks of whispered conversations and stolen moments, shattered like fragile glass under a hammer blow. It began as I led the others toward the tunnel entrance, heart hammering in my chest. The 15-minute broadcast window was closing fast. We'd shared fleeting glances, their faces etched with fear and determination. Then, from the shadows, a sharp voice barked, "Halt! Intruders detected." A guard stepped into the flickering light, baton raised. My breath caught. Levi was beside me. His eyes widened, and for a split second, I thought he might fight back. But then something froze inside him. "I didn't betray you," he whispered fiercely. "I swear, I'm still on your side." The guard moved closer. "No sudden moves," he snarled. The chaos exploded. We scrambled, each of us desperate to escape. I felt the sting of a blow across my ribs. A sharp pain exploded, but I pushed forward. Levi was knocked down hard. I lunged to help him, my voice cracking as I shouted, "Get up. We're not finished." Around us, guards swarmed like wolves. The compound's lockdown protocols activated fully, the steel doors slammed shut, trapping us inside. We were prisoners again. For hours, the compound became a cage of fear. The guards prowled the halls, searching, interrogating. We hid in shadows, nursing wounds and shattered hopes. Levi's chip, the lifeline of our rebellion, was gone. The betrayal cut deeper than any bruise. I looked at Levi, confusion and hurt warring in my heart. "Why didn't you tell me?" I demanded. "Who turned us in?" His voice was broken. "I don't know. I swear. But they have eyes everywhere." Days passed like a nightmare. We were isolated, separated from each other. I was taken to a small, windowless room with padded walls. The black door, rumored to be the final punishment, loomed in my thoughts. But the spark inside me refused to die. Memories of Elaine, of the broadcast plan, of the others waiting for a sign, kept me going. One night, I found a faint light under my door. A note slipped through. "Trust no one. Fight in silence." The rebellion was alive. But the enemy was closer than ever. Outside, the world was waking up. The broadcast, though brief, had sparked outrage. Families demanded answers. Activists pushed for investigations. But inside, the society tightened its grip. I knew the road ahead was darker. But I also knew we couldn't stop. The days after the lockdown were the hardest I've ever endured. They stripped me of everything, my clothes replaced with a thin, scratchy uniform, my identity erased once again. The black door loomed just down the hall, a constant reminder of the fate awaiting those who dared resist. But my mind refused to be silenced. The note slipped under my door haunted me. Trust no one. Fight in silence. Who had sent it? A flicker of hope in this prison of despair. I had to believe the rebellion was still alive. I spent my days walking the narrow halls, listening for anything out of place. Voices carried faintly through the walls, whispers of others planning, waiting. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I heard a familiar cough nearby. Cautiously, I followed the sound to the room across the hall. A frail old man sat on a cot, eyes sharp despite his frailty. He introduced himself as Marcus, Lot 3C. Marcus had been here longer than most. He told me stories of the auctions, the lies, and the cruelty. But most importantly, he spoke of a network, a secret communication system built from scraps of old tech and trust. "We use knocks, taps, even the hum of the ventilation," he said. "It's how we pass messages, keep hope alive." That night, I joined Marcus and a few others in a hidden corner of the compound. We tapped out codes, shared information, and planned small acts of defiance. Meanwhile, Levi remained distant. His face was haunted by guilt and fear. When I pressed him, he said little, only that the society's grip was tightening. Then came the unexpected. One morning, the compound received new clients, young, energetic, unaware of what awaited them. Levi explained quietly, "They're expanding. They want fresh recruits to replace those lost." I watched as families arrived, clutching hope in their hands. Some tried to resist. Others, like me once, believed in the promises. The question lingered in my mind. How many more would be sold? How many would disappear without a trace? But the rebellion was growing, even if slowly. Small victories, hidden messages, secret alliances, gave us strength. One night, Marcus brought me a tattered piece of paper. It was a map, one that showed a weak point in the compound's power grid. "If we can cut the lights, even for a few minutes," he said, "it could buy us the chance to escape." The plan was risky. But after weeks of silence and fear, any chance was worth taking. As I lay in my cot that night, the flicker of hope felt brighter than ever. The plan was simple on paper. Cut the compound's power for just a few minutes. Create chaos. Disrupt the surveillance. Give the rebellion a sliver of time to act. But simple plans rarely survive contact with reality. It was late evening when Marcus, Levi, Elaine, and I gathered near the basement's electrical room. The air was thick with tension, the dim light from a single bulb barely illuminating the worn control panels. Marcus handed me a small toolkit, wire cutters, a flashlight, and a set of makeshift blueprints. "We found a vulnerability," he said quietly. "The main power line runs through this room. If we sever it, the whole estate plunges into darkness. Cameras go offline, doors unlock for a moment." Elaine nodded. 15 minutes of blackout is all we get before backup generators kick in. But it's enough. Levi glanced nervously toward the door. "Guards rotate every 20 minutes. We have a narrow window." The four of us moved carefully down the narrow corridors, hearts pounding. Every shadow seemed alive, every noise a potential threat. When we reached the electrical room, the harsh smell of ozone and oil filled my nostrils. Marcus crouched beside the panel, expertly tracing wires. "This is it," he whispered. Levi kept watch at the door, his eyes darting. Elaine handed me the cutters. My hands trembled as I approached the thick cables. One snip, and the estate would fall into darkness. I hesitated. The weight of the moment pressed down. This was no longer just a fight for survival, it was a battle for justice. I bit my lip, then pressed the cutters around the main power line and squeezed. Instantly, the world plunged into darkness. The hum of electricity died. The compound was swallowed by silence, broken only by the distant gasps of guards and prisoners alike. For a brief moment, time stood still. Then chaos exploded. Doors clanged open as magnetic locks failed. Prisoners stirred, some disoriented, some roaring with newfound hope. Guards scrambled, shouting orders into the void. "Move!" Elaine hissed. We sprinted through corridors, the blackness our shield. I reached the control room, the heart of the estate's security network. Levi plugged in the stolen chip, fingers flying across the keyboard. "We're live," he said breathlessly. On screens across the estate, and streaming out to the world, the truth poured. Auction footage, client names, hidden cameras. Every secret, every lie, exposed. Voices echoed through the compound as prisoners recognized familiar faces on the broadcasts. Hope bloomed like wildfire. But the blackout was fleeting. Backup generators roared to life. Lights flickered back on. Alarms blared. The guards regained control quickly. But the damage was done. Levi looked exhausted but determined. "We did it," he said. "Now, we wait for the fallout." That night, in a hidden corner, Elaine and I reviewed the broadcast's impact. Social media exploded. News outlets demanded investigations. Families called the compound in tears, demanding answers. But within the estate, tension rose. The society tightened its grip. Security protocols increased. Surveillance became invasive. Yet the rebellion spirit was unbreakable. Secret meetings continued in whispers. Plans grew bolder. Then came the unexpected. A new face appeared in the compound, Agent Collins, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She claimed to be an investigator from an independent watchdog agency, sent to inspect conditions. At first, we were skeptical. But Collins moved quickly, asking questions, inspecting files, and quietly gathering information. Levi met with her in secret. "I don't fully trust her," he warned. "But she could be our key." I was torn. Could someone from the outside truly help us? Or was she another pawn in this deadly game? One night, Collins slipped me a folded note during a staged inspection. "I want to help. Meet me at the old chapel after lights out." The old chapel was a crumbling building on the estate's edge, long abandoned and forgotten. I arrived under the cover of darkness. Collins was waiting. She revealed what she'd uncovered: documents linking high-ranking officials to the society, evidence of bribery, cover-ups, and illegal auctions. But she warned me. The society is ruthless. If they suspect I'm helping you, they'll silence me. Together, we began to form a fragile alliance. Back in my room, I thought about everything: the betrayal, the broadcast, the rebellion, and now this unexpected ally. The road ahead was perilous. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to hope. The night was thick with fog when I slipped out of my room, clutching the folded note Agent Collins had passed me. My heart pounded, not just from fear, but from a strange flicker of hope. Hope that after so much darkness, maybe, just maybe, we had a chance. The estate was quiet, the usual hum of machines and footsteps replaced by an eerie silence. The dim moonlight barely pierced the thick mist as I made my way toward the old chapel at the edge of the grounds. The building was more ruin than sanctuary now, its stained glass windows shattered, stone walls crumbling, ivy creeping in like fingers. Collins was waiting inside, her sharp eyes scanning the shadows. "You made it," she said softly. I nodded, stepping inside. The air smelled of dust and forgotten prayers. She handed me a file thick with documents. "This is everything I've gathered. Names, transactions, locations. The society's web is far wider than you imagined." We spread the papers out on a broken pew. I traced the names: politicians, corporate magnates, even some celebrities, all linked to the auctions, the retreats, and the secret society pulling the strings. "We're not just fighting a compound," Collins said grimly. "We're up against a network that reaches into the highest levels of power." My mind raced. Exposure wasn't enough. We needed allies, people outside willing to risk everything. Suddenly, a noise from the chapel entrance made us freeze. Footsteps. Someone was coming. Collins moved quickly, pulling me into the shadows. A figure appeared, flashlight cutting through the dark. "Who's there?" a gruff voice called. We held our breath as the guard's beam swept past. When he passed, Collins whispered, "They're watching. We have to move." Back in the tunnels, we made plans. Collins promised to leak the documents to trusted journalists. Elaine and Levi would ready for the next broadcast. I would keep the prisoners' spirits alive. But trust was fragile. We all knew the society's reach was long. And betrayal could come from anywhere. Days later, whispers of investigations filled the compound. Guards were on edge. Some clients pulled their investments. But the society fought back: harsh punishments, increased surveillance, and whispers of disappearances. One night, as I sat with Marcus and others, a new message arrived, tapped out on the pipes. "The roof. Midnight. Help is coming." Hope and fear battled inside me. Was it real? Or another trap? The message had come through the faintest whisper, the taps against the rusted pipes in the east wing, a Morse code too subtle for most to catch but unmistakable to those who had learned to listen. "The roof. Midnight. Help is coming." I held the note in my hands, tracing the shaky dots and dashes that spelled out hope. Hope, though, was a double-edged sword in this place. It could light a fire that consumed or cast shadows darker than before. The hours leading up to midnight crawled like a slow poison. The compound was on edge. Guards prowled with sharpened vigilance. Cameras swiveled, watching every corridor, every stairwell. The society's grip tightened as though aware that their carefully constructed cage was beginning to crack. Inside my cramped quarters, I prepared quietly. Elaine had given me a small, hidden transmitter, an old device she'd salvaged from the estate's discarded tech. "We might not get another chance," she said softly. "If the help is real, this is when it'll come. And if it's a trap, well, we'll face that together." I moved through the hallways, shadows clinging to me like a second skin. Every step echoed, every breath a prayer. At the stairwell leading to the roof, I paused. Levi joined me silently, eyes scanning the gloom. "I don't know if we can trust this," he muttered. "But we have to try." I nodded. The door to the roof was cold metal, rusted and heavy. I pushed it open, and the night air rushed in like a cleansing storm. Above, the sky was a thick canvas of clouds, the moon hidden, stars blurred by mist. The wind tugged at my clothes as I climbed the final steps. I wasn't alone. Figures emerged from the shadows, Agent Collins among them, flanked by a small group of unmarked individuals. Their faces were determined, weapons holstered but ready. "We got your message," Collins said quietly. "The world is watching now, Harold. We're here to finish what you started." Relief flooded through me, mingled with fear. The stakes were higher than ever. If we succeeded tonight, everything would change. If we failed, the darkness would swallow us whole. Collins explained the plan. They had a team outside the estate, ready to storm in once the broadcast was secured. Our job was to keep the compound security offline long enough to upload the damning files Levi had secured. The rooftop became a war room. Levi and Elaine worked furiously on the laptop, fingers flying over the keys. Marcus and I kept watch, scanning the perimeter for threats. Suddenly, a noise. Footsteps on the roof access ladder. Guards. We scrambled, ducking behind air vents and machinery. The guards moved closer, voices low but urgent. Levi whispered, "If they find us now, it's over." Elaine nodded, sweat beading on her forehead. I took a deep breath, and in the dark, raised my voice. "Over here." The guards turned, startled. I sprinted toward the nearest stairwell, heart pounding. Chaos erupted. Gunfire cracked. Collins shouted orders into her radio. Levi and Elaine worked to maintain the connection. From below, sirens wailed. The rescue team was moving in. I fought through the panic, ducking behind crates and vents. I heard Collins' voice again, steady, fierce. "We're live. Uploading now." The screens flickered across the compound and streaming worldwide. Files revealing auctions, identities, abuses, every hidden secret, were flooding the network. Guards scrambled to shut down the feeds. Doors slammed. But the blackout persisted. Levi's code was holding. Minutes stretched into eternity. Then, the compound erupted into chaos. Prisoners, emboldened by the broadcast, began to rise. I found Marcus helping an elderly woman who had collapsed. "Stay with me," I urged. The guards were losing control. Shouts, footsteps, cries filled the halls. Then, footsteps heavy and hurried approached the rooftop stairwell. I turned, ready to fight. But it was the rescue team. Armed, determined, they stormed the compound. The battle was fierce but brief. The society's forces were outnumbered and exposed. As dawn broke, the compound was surrounded. The elites behind the auctions were arrested. Families reunited. But as I stood on the rooftop, watching the sun rise over a broken estate, I knew the fight wasn't over. The society was vast. Its roots tangled deep. But tonight, the darkness had been pushed back. The dawn broke over the estate like a fragile promise, pale light spilling across cracked walls, shattered glass, and empty corridors once ruled by silence and fear. For the first time in what felt like years, the air smelled of something close to freedom. The rescue team had secured the compound. Guards who once wore masks of authority were now disarmed, rounded up by uniformed officers. The elite clients who'd thrived behind the scenes were exposed and arrested, their carefully constructed network crumbling like a house of cards. Yet, as the sun rose, I stood on the rooftop, heart heavy with a bitter truth: liberation was only the beginning. Inside, the elderly prisoners emerged from their hiding places, blinking in the harsh morning light, faces etched with exhaustion and disbelief. Families had begun arriving, faces blurred by tears and relief, desperate to reclaim loved ones stolen away under false promises. Marcus, frail but steady, stood beside me. "It's over," he said quietly. I shook my head. "No, Marcus. The fight's just changed." Levi approached, his eyes still shadowed by guilt and loss. "The society won't go quietly," he warned. "They've lost this battle, but the war's far from over." His words were a cold splash of reality. The system that had traded human lives for profit was vast, tangled in political power, corporate greed, and silence. Days passed in a blur of investigations and interviews. Authorities combed through the estate's records, sifting through mountains of evidence. Elaine and I spoke publicly, recounting horrors and hope, determined to ensure no one else would suffer in silence. But even as the media spotlight grew, I knew darkness lurked beyond the headlines. One afternoon, as I rested in a small room provided by the authorities, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number. "They're not finished. Watch your back." Fear crept back like an unwelcome guest. I told Levi and Elaine. "We have to stay vigilant," Levi said. "This isn't just about exposure. It's about dismantling every part of their network." Collins, now working openly with law enforcement, shared intelligence about attempts to intimidate witnesses and disrupt investigations. The society was desperate. But we weren't alone. Across the country, new groups formed, advocates, survivors, whistleblowers, all demanding accountability. Still, the scars ran deep. Many prisoners struggled with trauma and lost years. Families worked to rebuild broken bonds. I thought often of my wife, the life I'd lost, the years stolen. And yet, in the faces of those I helped free, I found new purpose. One evening, Levi and I stood overlooking the city skyline. "We've come so far," he said softly. "But the future, that's the real fight." The world outside was moving fast, headlines flashing across screens, social media buzzing with outrage, and governments scrambling to respond. The Willow Program, once a whispered secret in dark corridors, was now a global scandal. But inside me, the fight was far from over. Freedom, I learned, was not a moment but a process. When the prison gates finally opened, and we stepped out into the pale dawn, the weight of years behind bars clung to our skin like a second shadow. Faces I'd known only as lot numbers became real again, trembling hands, tear-streaked cheeks, eyes that searched for something they feared might be lost forever. Levi walked beside me, his steps heavy with the burden of his past and uncertain future. We were no longer prisoner and betrayer, we were survivors, struggling to find common ground on a fractured path. The first days were a whirlwind. Families rushed to reunite, journalists bombarding us with questions, authorities taking statements and promises of justice. But the society's tendrils reached far beyond the estate. We quickly realized that exposing the auctions was only the beginning. The system that enabled such cruelty thrived on secrecy, manipulation, and fear. Collins had become our fiercest ally. Her investigations uncovered layers of corruption, politicians bribed to look the other way, corporations laundering money, even religious institutions complicit in silence. Together, we formed a coalition. Survivors, advocates, journalists, and honest officials working to dismantle the society piece by piece. Yet the road was treacherous. Threats arrived, subtle at first, suspicious cars outside homes, anonymous calls, hacked emails. Then more blatant, attacks on activists, attempts to intimidate journalists. One night, Levi and I sat in my small apartment. He showed me a list, names of people in danger, potential targets in the fight for truth. "It's not just us," he said grimly. "It's everyone who speaks out." But despite the danger, hope persisted. Communities organized protests, survivors shared their stories, and legal battles began to strip power from the society's leaders. Elaine, though still healing from her ordeal, became a voice of courage and resilience. Her speeches inspired many to rise and demand change. One afternoon, as we prepared for a major court hearing, a new piece of evidence arrived. An anonymous package. Inside, a flash drive, encrypted. Levi and I worked through the night, decrypting files that revealed the society's next plan, expanding their operations overseas, targeting vulnerable communities, and silencing dissent through new, even darker means. The scale was staggering. We realized the fight was global. But so was the resistance. Our coalition connected with groups worldwide, sharing intelligence and strategies. Meanwhile, I struggled with my own demons. Memories of captivity haunted my nights. I often woke gasping, trapped again in that cold room, feeling the weight of the black door looming. Therapy helped, but healing was slow. Yet every day, I reminded myself why I fought, for Elaine, for Levi, for all those still trapped. One morning, as spring bloomed outside, Collins arrived with urgent news. "There's a leak," she said. "Someone on the inside is sabotaging us." Paranoia gripped the coalition. Trust became fragile. Levi suggested we tighten security and vet everyone carefully. But the damage was done. Meetings were interrupted by mysterious calls. Files disappeared. One night, an encrypted message reached me: "They watch. They listen. Be careful who you trust." Despite everything, we pressed on. Our biggest court case approached, a trial that could dismantle the society legally. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. Survivors shared harrowing testimonies. Families told of loss and hope. The society's lawyers fought hard, trying to discredit witnesses, delay proceedings, intimidate judges. But truth, once exposed, has a power no lies can contain. The verdict came. Guilty. Relief washed over us. But the fight to protect new laws, ensure proper enforcement, and support survivors would continue. As I left the courthouse, Levi beside me, I looked up at the sky. Clouds parted, and sunlight spilled over the city. Freedom was no longer a distant dream. It was real. Even after the court's verdict, the fight didn't end. In many ways, it was just beginning. The society's leaders might have been convicted, but the system they built was layered and insidious. Like a serpent shedding skin, it shifted, adapted, seeking new ways to survive. Days turned into weeks. The coalition grew stronger but faced mounting resistance. Political pressure, media distractions, and bureaucratic delays threatened to stall progress. Collins warned us repeatedly, "We've cut off one head of the beast, but the body is still alive." Levi and I kept digging. We uncovered hidden accounts, offshore shells, and connections to other shady organizations. One night, I met with Marcus in a quiet cafe, far from the compound and prying eyes. He looked older than ever, but his spirit was unbroken. "I've been watching," he said. "There's something beneath the surface, something darker." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were notes and photos, evidence of experiments, human trafficking, and worse. I swallowed hard. This was beyond auctions and auctions clients. This was a nightmare buried deep. Levi joined us. Together, we vowed to expose it all. Meanwhile, Elaine continued to speak out, inspiring survivors worldwide. Her courage reminded us why we fought. But the society was watching. One evening, as I returned home, I found my door ajar. Inside, papers scattered, drawers pulled open. A message was left: "We see you." Fear surged. But so did determination. We tightened security, shared intelligence, and prepared for the next battle. The world was watching, but the shadows were closing in. The feeling of being watched settled over me like a thick fog, suffocating and relentless. The warning left on my door was no empty threat. The society still had eyes and ears everywhere. Levi and I tightened our circle, trusting only a handful. Even Collins, for all her loyalty, urged caution. We began vetting new allies carefully, aware that betrayal could come from the closest quarters. Each meeting was held in secret, in places where cameras couldn't reach and words couldn't be overheard. One night, a trusted informant whispered about a mole inside our coalition, someone feeding information back to the society. Suspicion sliced through our ranks like a knife. Levi confronted everyone, searching for signs. Tensions grew. Friendship strained under the weight of mistrust. Meanwhile, I felt the past creeping back, nightmares of the compound, the auctions, the silence. I fought to stay focused, reminding myself this was bigger than me. Elaine continued to rally survivors, but even she admitted the pressure was mounting. Then came the blow. Collins disappeared. No warning, no message. Just silence. Panic rippled through the coalition. Had the society caught her? Or had she fled? We scrambled to trace her last steps. Levi and I went through her notes, encrypted files, names, locations. One name stood out, a high-ranking official suspected of orchestrating attacks on our movement. It was a breakthrough, and a target painted on our backs. Determined to find Collins and expose the official, we planned a covert operation deep inside government archives. As we prepared, I felt the weight of every life depending on us. Failure wasn't an option. The night air was thick with anticipation and fear as Levi and I prepared to infiltrate the government archives. The files Collins had uncovered were buried deep, hidden behind layers of bureaucracy and digital defenses. But this was our best chance to find her and unravel the last threads of the society's deadly web. We moved through shadowed back alleys and forgotten service tunnels, hearts pounding with every step. Trust was a luxury we couldn't afford. Every noise echoed like a warning, every glance felt like a threat. Inside the archive building, the sterile hum of computers and fluorescent lights was a stark contrast to the chaos outside. We slipped past security cameras using forged credentials Levi had painstakingly crafted. The cold chill of the air conditioning bit through our thin jackets, a sharp reminder of how exposed we were. Levi whispered, "We have 10 minutes before the next security sweep." We hurried through endless rows of filing cabinets and digital terminals, searching for the encrypted files Collins had marked. The official's name haunted every thought, someone powerful enough to silence whistleblowers, cover up crimes, and strike fear into the hearts of those who dared resist. Suddenly, a soft beep. A motion sensor. Our breaths caught as footsteps approached. We ducked behind a steel cabinet just as two guards passed by, their conversation low but filled with menace. "Boss wants this place tight," one muttered. "No leaks." We waited, hearts pounding, until the corridor was clear. Back at the terminal, Levi hacked into the system. Screens flickered as encrypted folders unlocked one by one. Then, there she was. A file marked Collins. Inside, a video message. Collins's face appeared, weary but defiant. She spoke urgently about the society's plans, the mole inside our coalition, and a secret facility where they were holding other survivors, including people close to us. "Harold, Levi," she said, "I'm alive, but time is running out. They're moving survivors to a hidden location, somewhere remote, guarded by mercenaries." Her voice cracked. "You have to find me, and them, before it's too late." The video ended abruptly. Silence pressed in. Levi clenched his fists. "We can't wait. We have to move fast," I said. Exiting the archives was no easier than entering. Alarms blared before we made the last corner. Guards pursued us through the maze of hallways. We sprinted, dodged, and hid, every second a battle against capture. Outside, the cold night air felt like a breath of freedom, but danger was close behind. As we disappeared into the city's shadows, I knew this mission could break the society once and for all, or bury us in silence forever. The city's night swallowed us as Levi and I vanished into the maze of alleys and abandoned buildings. Collins's message burned in my mind, survivors hidden away in a remote facility, guarded by mercenaries, their fate hanging by a thread. Every step felt heavy with urgency. Time was no longer a luxury, it was a weapon the society wielded against us. We moved fast, guided by scraps of intelligence pieced together from Collins's files and whispered rumors from allies on the outside. The place was deep in the woods, miles from any town, far enough to hide secrets and silence cries. The journey was brutal. Dense trees clawed at our clothes, shadows playing tricks on our eyes. The weight of what awaited us pressed down with every crunch of leaves underfoot. Levi's face was grim but determined. "We're close," he said. "Stay sharp." The compound came into view, a sprawling complex wrapped in barbed wire and watchtowers, menacing under the pale moonlight. Floodlights scanned the perimeter, guards patrolling like wolves guarding their den. We waited until the guards rotated, slipping into the shadows like ghosts. The outer fences were no obstacle. Years of training and desperation had made us nimble. Inside, the facility was cold and clinical. Rows of rooms, sealed doors, cameras blinking with silent menace. Echoes of footsteps and muffled cries reached us through the walls. Levi pulled out a device, an improvised jammer to disable cameras temporarily. We moved quickly, searching for the survivors Collins had spoken of. In one room, we found them, broken, frightened, but alive. Among them were faces I recognized, others who had been taken, disappeared into this nightmare. Their eyes told stories of lost years and stolen hope. I promised them freedom. But as we prepared to leave, the alarms blared. Our presence betrayed. The mercenaries poured in, armed, ruthless, unyielding. A brutal fight erupted. Levi and I fought side by side, every move fueled by desperation and rage. We lost some in the chaos. Pain seared deep, but surrender was never an option. The jammer failed. Cameras blinked back to life. Backup forces would arrive any minute. Using the chaos, we led the survivors through hidden tunnels Elaine had mapped from stolen blueprints. The forest swallowed us once more. Hours later, safe at a hidden safe house, tears flowed freely. Not just from relief, but from grief for those lost, and hope for what remained. Collins appeared, wounded but alive. Her smile was faint but fierce. "We've broken their silence," she said. "But the fight continues." In the days that followed, the world learned the full truth. Mass arrests. Global investigations. Laws rewritten. Families reunited. Survivors began healing. Levi and I stood together on a hill overlooking the city. The scars we carried were many, but so was the strength. "Do you think it's really over?" he asked. I looked out at the sunrise. As long as people remember, and speak out, no darkness can stay hidden. To everyone who has listened, thank you. This story is yours now. Speak up. Fight for those who cannot. And before I go, where are you listening from? Your voice matters more than you know. If you want more stories that challenge the silence, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The end, or just the beginning?